shuttle on which people are jammed in like sardines to make the move from Washington to New York and Boston, back and forth. So it's here maybe to observe the landing of a different kind of shuttle. Well, we expect them to come out very shortly. At least that's what we're told. And they will then go and down here to this VIP tent, we understand, and speak to the people who have been waiting there for them. There are quite a few dignitaries, political figures, and others, representatives of the administration, and of course of NASA, who are very happy to confer their congratulations upon them in person. Then later today, the astronauts will go to Houston, to the Johnson Space Center, where they will meet with the people who monitored every second of this operation, and to whom, of course, so much of the credit for the success of the mission should rightfully go. They'll get a big reception there, no doubt. And then begins the debriefing process, as Gene Cernan noted some time ago. They'll have a lot to tell the people who put this thing together. And there's the crowd at the VIP center waiting for them to come down. They'll have a lot to tell the people who put this mission together, who designed the various instruments and the machinery and the technological gadgetry that went into getting it off the pad so spectacularly the other day at the Kennedy Space Center. Hard to imagine that there could be a more fantastic and engrossing sight, really, than that was the other day, as it descended up out of that tremendous cloud of vapor. For a second there, it looked as though everything had just blown up on the pad, and then up came that tip of the external tank, the mother fuel tank that provided so much of the power to lift the orbiter on up into orbit. And Max Robinson has been spending all these anxious hours there, and exhilarating hours, I know too, Max, at Mission Control in Houston.
Frank,
what are your thoughts?
Especially exhilarating when you had touchdown. Exhilaration that you could feel in Mission Control with the 15 seconds of celebration, but the discipline to go back to their jobs. They handed over control here at Mission Control about 2:30 p.m. About 2:30 because someone forgot to look at the clock. They were so exuberant, shaking hands and talking about the success of the flight. Incidentally, we said earlier that the astronauts and their families would arrive here at 2:30, or that is at 6:31 Eastern Standard Time. That's been delayed somewhat, and we're not sure exactly what time they will arrive, but it is open to the public at Ellington Air Force Base.
May give them time to wind down a little, Max. You know, I can understand that feeling, although I never had any kind of high compared to those guys landing that, but the last thing they would think of doing would be to sit down and relax. They will unwind in time, but at first, the only thing John Young could do would be get out there and walk around, and you know the feeling.
I would think it would take a lot of time, a long time to come down.
It'd be a long time before they come down from that. They got it to the ground. A thing that interested me was 12 years ago, there were procedures at NASA that might be holding now on making out personal expense accounts, and you had to make a detailed report of where you'd been.
They make out those too?
Yes, in Buzz Aldrin's book, he said he billed, and it was a serious report, where he had been and what it had cost him, the expense to him.
Right.
He mentioned that he had military aircraft from Houston to Canaveral. From Canaveral to the moon, there was government transport, and from the moon back, military transport back to Houston, and then his car to his house, and it cost $37. That's what he recovered. Right?
Not a bad trip. One other thing we might mention, here at Mission Control, in the control room, they were putting up the plaque for Columbia. That plaque joins 31 other plaques, 31 space missions that have been controlled out of the Johnson Space Center Mission Control here in Houston. Frank?
Thank you, Max, and thank you, Hugh. And I have here with me a young man who was eagerly looking forward to one of those flights. He is Colonel Guy Bluford of the United States Air Force, and he is an astronaut. Colonel Bluford has been sitting here with me this morning, providing invaluable help in telling me what was going on and making sure that I didn't make too many mistakes, and I'm grateful to you, Colonel.
It's good to be here, Frank.
But I'd like to know now, you're going to fly one of these things one of these days.
Yes, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
And you must feel a little bit better about it now after seeing it come down.
I agree, and I'm really pretty thrilled right now. I think we've really demonstrated that we can really fly this vehicle. Now it's time to go to work.
What is going to be your job when you go up? Do you know?
Well, I'm going to be a mission specialist, which means that I'll be handling cargo, satellites, and doing experiments in orbit. And I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Yes. Do you have any idea when?
No, I really don't. We still have to learn a lot about the vehicle. We still have 3 more flight tests that we need to do on the vehicle, but I suspect once we get into the operational phase, starting next year, you know, I can start looking for possible flight slots.
Well, I've looked over your bio, you know, and you've been flying planes for quite a while now, and you've been doing all sorts of exotic things with them and teaching other people. How long have you actually been in training as an astronaut?
Been in training about 2.5 years, and find it really quite challenging.
Really?
Just to learn all the systems and all you really need to know to be an astronaut.
So even though you're a command pilot, aren't you?
Yes.
Even though you do that, when you have that kind of capability, you still got a lot to learn when you get into the space business.
Definitely, there's still quite a bit to learn, even about the vehicle.
I'll stay right here with us, Colonel, because I want to have a conversation with Gene Cernan, who knows what it's like to rocket off a pad and to come back, not necessarily in a space shuttle, but as he did as the commander of Apollo 17. The astronauts, let me just remind you, are still in a building over here just beyond where we are, where there are buildings. There's nothing out here but sand and desert and mountains about 100 miles away. And we expect them to come out very soon and head on down to the VIP area where they're supposed to talk to people and have a few words and tell us in their own words what they think of this mission, although I suppose it's fairly easy to expect just exactly what their feelings are. Gene, what advice do you have to give to this young man who's going to ride this thing into space?
Hang in there. It's well worth it. It's a long wait, a lot of hard work, but I tell you, there's no more motivating experience in your life than the opportunity to do what you just saw being done by John and Cripp. We've got a number of outstanding young people in the space program. I don't like to be called an old astronaut. I don't feel I'm quite that old, but I've been fortunate enough to have some pretty unique and exciting experiences, and I think it's time now to get some young talent, some new talent. I'm just amazed at the capability and background, both professional aviator type and educational activity and background that the young and new astronauts have. I'm impressed. I'm looking forward to the day they do get their hands on this vehicle, because when you match the two, then the marriage will really be complete.
Well, it is important, too, that people who are of a relatively young age go into this program, I gather, because there is so much to learn. And you really can't start too late in life, can you?
No, you really can't. And I have to agree with you, Frank. There is quite a bit to learn about this plane in order to fly it the way it needs to be flown.
Well, you went into aviation really right out of college, didn't you, Colonel? I mean, you took your degree in aerospace engineering?
That's right. And went into the Air Force and flew airplanes right after that.
You flew them everywhere. You flew them in Vietnam and everywhere. Yeah.
That's
But this, why can't you, I shouldn't put it this way. I was going to say, why can't you find out when you're going to actually make your mission? It would seem to me that would just drive you crazy, going through all this training and not knowing when you're going to get it. Are you certain, for example, now, that you're at the stage of your training where you're going to get a mission?
Well, I feel that I can fly right now, Frank, but still there's a lot I need to learn about the vehicle, and there are a lot of other people who have been in the program a lot longer than I have, who've learned a great deal more about the vehicle than I do. But I'm going to hang in there. I'm going to be patient enough to get my ride, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, as Gene Cernan said, hang in there is the right thing, because apparently the rewards of doing this certainly justify all the, not months, years and years of work. And it must be very, very painstaking work and study.
Well, there's really quite a bit to it, and
where are you based now? Where are you?
I'm out of Houston, and I work with the shuttle simulators and that sort of thing. But it is really quite challenging to learn as much as I can about the shuttle.
Mm-hmm. Well, since we're talking about the young taking over from the older, I shouldn't say old, that reminds me that we have a report by Steve Shepard on the evolution of the shuttle itself, how it progressed from a dream in somebody's mind to the reality that landed so splendidly here today.
In 1929, a Viennese engineering student named Eugen Sanger proposed launching a winged rocket capable of going into orbit and then gliding back to Earth. Sanger's Silver Bird combined the ballistic characteristics of a rocket with the flying characteristics of a plane. Near the end of World War II, Sanger's concept got its first practical tryout. Werner von Braun's rocket team at Peenemünde, Germany, put wings on a V-2 and sent it aloft. The V-4B, as it was called, made a successful transition from rocket to winged flight before atmospheric stresses tore it apart. After the war, the U.S. continued the winged rocket studies begun by the Germans. In 1946, the Bell X-1 took to the skies and became the first of a series of rocket vehicles that would culminate in the X-15, a ship that was half airplane, half spacecraft. These X-series aircraft were built initially to test supersonic and hypersonic airplane flight, but the knowledge and experience they provided renewed interest in the winged spaceflight envisioned by von Braun and Sanger. Thus, in 1952, Bell Aircraft proposed Project Bomai. Bell's concept was to use a piloted rocket booster to carry a winged and manned rocket glider bomber into near space. The early Bell design envisioned a glider riding piggyback on the booster and is therefore sometimes hailed as the grandfather of today's shuttle design. At the same time, the feasibility of this novel rocket configuration was being demonstrated with launchings of the piggyback Navajo missile. Project Bomai, which never flew, eventually became Project Dinosaur, an abbreviation for dynamic soaring. The project was funded in 1958, its goal to use a disposable Atlas, Saturn, or Titan rocket to boost into orbit a manned glider capable of flying back to Earth. But the project was dropped in 1963, in part due to cost and technical difficulties. More significantly, space capsules had by then become the rage. The Gemini capsules then under development could accomplish most of the objectives of Dinosaur and were cheaper, simpler, and could be ready to fly sooner.
But if Dinosaur was dead, the idea of a spacecraft that could glide home from orbit was not. Throughout the late 60s and early 1970s, NASA built a number of small craft to test various concepts.
The most famous of these was probably the M2F2, affectionately dubbed the Flying Bathtub. It and successor designs tested the lifting body concept, under which aircraft derived their gliding capabilities as much from their shape as from their small wings. In the late 60s, with Americans on the moon, NASA again began planning an orbiting spaceship with wings. The shuttle was to become NASA's main space program as the Apollo moon mission came to an end. Early concepts included a dizzying array of possible designs. Sometimes the shuttle orbiter sat on top of its boosters. At other times, it was strapped on piggyback. Sometimes the boosters had wings and pilots who could fly them back to Earth. In other versions, they were simple cylinders. Some orbiters came equipped with external fuel tanks. Others had internal tanks and snap-down wings for re-entry. Some had hardly any wings at all. Some shuttle systems looked like flying boats. Another resembled a gigantic tubed pitch pipe, which NASA called the Triomese. Eventually, as cost became an increasingly important factor, the present design was settled upon. And today, 50 years after Eugen Sanger first dreamed of lofting men into space and flying them safely back, the Columbia, the world's first reusable space system, is reality.
And there is Columbia. We were able to conclude that report by Steve Shepard with the videotape of Columbia coming in for that beautiful landing today. Let's listen to it again.
40, 30, 20, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, touchdown. Those gears, 10 feet.
I can't get over, Gene, how clean that landing was, how level the wings were.
That was touchdown at
3, touchdown. Look about, skipper.
At 20 minutes after 1 o'clock, 20 minutes and 52 seconds after 1 o'clock Eastern time is when the touchdown actually occurred. Just about precisely on schedule, and they rolled right to the point where they were supposed to stop. We've just had a phone call from our White House correspondent, Sam Donaldson, who tells us that President Reagan, who is still convalescing from the gunshot wound he suffered 2 weeks ago yesterday, has released a statement from the White House, and we have part of it here anyway. It's a statement from the President to John Young and Bob Crippen, and here is part of what the President had to say. Your brave adventure has opened a new era in space travel. We thank God for your safe return. Today the world watched us in triumph. We are proud of you and proud of our country. Welcome home. So the President undoubtedly speaking for everybody here today, for everybody in the country, in expressing those sentiments to the two brave astronauts, John Young and Robert Crippen, who so skillfully and flawlessly piloted their winged spacecraft. Started out as a rocket, became a space plane, spacecraft, then a space plane, and finally a very, very heavy but still graceful glider as it came down here and landed right on the mark at Edwards Air Force Base. Just to set the scene for you once again, we're staying on the air because we kind of like to hear what these fellas have to say. And we haven't yet had that opportunity. They are still in a medical building over here where they met with their families and talked with the doctors. But we are still given to understand that they will eventually come out and head to where microphones are set up, and we'll have a few words. Not very much, apparently, because their day is not over. They still have to go on to Houston, and there they will be given a reception at Ellington Air Force Base. I think you, Downs, mentioned a while ago that it's open to the public if people would like to go out and see the two space heroes, and no doubt that there will be a big crowd there. But Jules and Jean, are you still over there in your sun-baked spot? Yes, I see you.
Did you want us medium rare or well done, Frank?
Well, we're all burnt to a crisp now, I think, but it was kind of worth it, wasn't it?
It was well worth it. We're a long way across this desert, and we had somewhat of a different view than you did, Frank, but it was a spectacular view of the bird coming home, and I don't think I'll ever forget that as long as I live. You were talking earlier with Colonel Bluford. One of the things I was thinking of during your discussion is when you asked him if he's ready, and I think we were always ready. I think every one of those young men and women in the program are ready now, and if they don't feel that they're perhaps the best pilot or the best mission specialist available to do the job, and that they can do it better than anyone else in the program, then perhaps they aren't ready. That's the feeling. That's the level of competition that is involved. Very friendly competition.
But me about all you fellows, I was starting to ask Colonel Bluford about this. Did he realize how long you have to wait for a flight? Are the number of people who have waited 10 years or longer for a flight, and the depth of dedication, the strength of motivation that kept them hanging in there all that time? Our friend Joe Allen, who was Capcom in this flight, a scientist astronaut, has been a scientist astronaut since 1966, 15 years. And Joe Allen may never fly. No one has any idea, including Joe, of when he'll fly.
Well, things worthwhile, Jules, are worth waiting for. I say that perhaps I was a little fortunate. I flew the third year I was in a program, and before I was in 9 years, I flew 3 times. Some of my colleagues didn't fly until they were in 9 or 10 years, as you said. But you're right, the dedication, the level of spirit and competition among the guys is a special kind of tribute to the program and what the program means to them.
Well, Jean and Jules, I should think that a certain measure of self-confidence is absolutely essential for an astronaut.
Well, if you asked me if I could fly that airplane as well as John Young did out there today, I'd give John, this is his day. This is his and Cripp's day.
Yes.
But I think there's not a pilot anywhere in the world, particularly who has been or is now in the space program, who wouldn't say, you betcha I could fly it just as well as John can, and maybe even a little bit better.
They are not in sight, at least in our sight at the moment, Young and Crippen. As I said, they're still in the building, but here they are coming out of the spacecraft some time ago. John Young was the first out. He didn't really require much help to come down those stairs, did he? And he was obviously very happy. Something dropped there, but he scooped it up.
You know, Frank, John has changed over the years. You perhaps remember him back when he flew Gemini 3 with Gus Grissom.
Here's Crippen, Gene.
Okay,
yes.
Here's Bob coming out. They're 2 happy young men, I'll say that. I keep saying young, but I don't know, this whole thing has made me even a little bit younger.
State of mind, not a chronological fixture.
But John, you know, during that Gemini 3 flight, Gus would say something, and he was not the most talkative individual in the world, and John's answer was, well, I agree with Gus. I think you've heard...
I can recall doing the original crew interviews with John Young, before and during Gemini 3 and after Gemini 3. And his statements were limited to exactly what you said. I agree with everything Gus said.
But John takes a much broader and more serious perspective to the business he's involved in right now. I think we saw that in some of the interviews that Jules, you had with John about the significance of the shuttle and the space program, and his views, the fact that he stayed in the program this long, the fact that he's flown 4 times when he could have perhaps done other things, I think are an indication of the dedication that has evolved and the seriousness that he has put into his efforts and his work.
Well, John has been in the program so long, Gene, that in my opinion, he's grown up a lot. He's matured. He always was a fine engineering test pilot. He's now a more mature human being to go with it. He's a pleasure to deal with.
Well, he's to be a nice man to fly with, too, I would say, Jules, after what he's done here today.
Frank, you'd be very comfortable with John. There's no question in my mind.
You know, I think it might be useful at this point to introduce an interview that was done some time ago with author Tom Wolfe, who wrote the book The Right Stuff, about just what it is that makes these people perform the way they do. And he talks particularly about John Young, the commander of Columbia. Tom Wolfe.
Young was a classic, old-style fighter jock test pilot. The kind of guy who flew hard, who lived hard, drove automobiles fast, and lived life at a merry old clip, at a much faster clip than astronauts were generally supposed to, considered to be a living life, I might say. And Young had, when he was in the Navy, had set two speed to climb records, they're called. It's, one was a record for 3,000 meters, which is what? It's about 4/5 of a mile, I guess. And then another one for 25,000 meters, which is about 38,000 feet, about 7.5 miles. And he set these records in the F-4, which was the Navy's prime plane. Now we're going back to 1962. That was the same year that he was chosen as an astronaut in the second group. And he immediately became part of the inner circle of the astronauts. The Group 2 and Group 1 had so much in common. There was a lot of military experience there, I mean, and a lot of combat experience, and they all were brought up in the same system of beliefs. And it was, Young was in a way, he would have sort of Peck's bad boy streak in him. And Young is the sort of pilot who, to this day, just lives to fly. Now, he has been in space 4 times, twice in Gemini and twice in Apollo. And many of the astronauts, after they made their Apollo flight, didn't want to fly in space anymore because they had reached the top of the mountain. There was no place to go in terms of your career once you had made an Apollo flight to the moon. And John Young walked on the moon. And not many people have done that. It meant if you wanted to fly again, you had to go back in the rotation, which meant not simply being going on a backup crew, but onto a support crew. A support crew is 2 steps back from the prime crew. And a support crew is the glorified messenger boys. You run coffee for the prime crew. So most people, after they've been at the top of the mountain, don't feel like going down to the bottom again. But John Young is one of these people who lives to fly. So now he's 50 years old. He'll be 51 later this year. He's flying again in the shuttle.
Well, that was Tom Wolfe, the author of the book The Right Stuff, an appropriately named book because it was about people who undertake daring experiments in flight. It's a powerful book too because it describes in very graphic detail the cost in human life, the tragedy that's involved. That's never very far from your mind here at Edwards Air Force Base. Over in the base chapel, there's a plaque. It seems to me an ever-lengthening list of names on it of people who have lost their lives in the development of experimental aircraft and carrying out these quite hazardous missions. This is a school for test pilots, and the element of danger can never be very far from anybody's mind here, although these people, with the right stuff, somehow seem to be able to sublimate it, whereas lesser mortals might be consumed by it. I think it might be useful now for us, while we're waiting for the astronauts to come out and make an appearance so that all of us can see them and hear what they have to say, to go back and review very briefly the highlights of this mission. They're in that building over there, and we'll stay on the air until they come out and talk. But right now, we want to go back to where this actually began, at the Kennedy Space Center, 7 o'clock Sunday morning, and we'll pick up the countdown. 3, 2, 1.
10,
Here it comes.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have
Powerful engines ignited. And the great cloud billowed up. Jules and Gene, relive this with me.
Oh, honey, go.
The earth shook, Frank.
Fly like an eagle.
The sky roared. Our spirits soared. After waiting that long, our bodies vibrated with the staccato staccato feel of the rockets and emotion, I think.
And here's where they did the rollover, wasn't it?
This is where they had they rolled and they were now going into orbit on their back. Here's a television picture when they were in orbit successfully, and
when they first saw the Earth missing.
That's the Earth at the top.
And we have the Earth at the top. Remember, they're upside down going forward, and we had the Earth's horizon at the top. Now the television camera is searching through the large payload bay with those big doors open. And of course, that's where we saw a couple of the tiles missing, which obviously didn't hurt. This is inside the spacecraft. You know, I guess no one's ever said anything about it, but John Young is wearing glasses, and that just says that astronauts in truth are human, and at 40 our eyes begin to go just like everybody else's.
They talked with George Bush, Vice President, last night.
The very best.
George Bush had a fine discussion with them, and inspiring to those of us who listen to it here. Here's a picture of the Earth. We can see the horizon rolling around, and of course we're back to mission control, the ever significant and important part of each space flight. It's important to know that the crews actually do control their spacecraft from on board. Mission control sends them a lot of information, updates their computers, but as in Apollo and Gemini and this shuttle, we always flew and controlled the spacecraft from on board. And of course here was a tremendous control feat for John Young as the Columbia was coming back home. The numbers you hear called out after the landing gear is dropped just over the lake bed, I believe might even be Bob Crippen. You heard the numbers and altitude when we landed on the moon called out by the lunar module pilot. I think the co-pilot in this case is calling the numbers out. He calls 20, 10, 5.
Last time I was here for the landing test, Gene, it was always a chase plane pilot. To be sure they got precise guidance down to the ground. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And there she is. Truly a remarkable machine, and about to let her nose touch the desert floor.
There had been some concern about the tires, too, that they'd be able to withstand the tremendous pressure. But I guess they were designed appropriately.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful.
We had a shot a moment ago of mission control in Houston. It looked to me like the place has been deserted. Is that true, Max and Hugh? Are you the only ones in charge there?
Absolutely deserted. I think we'll be able to see mission control here. Do you see any human being in sight? I don't. They cleared out shortly after 2:30 when they handed over control. Well, actually, about a half hour later, they handed over control to Dryden at about 2:30. They celebrated a bit in the control room. And now they have left, and we're told that some of them have gone home and gone to sleep.
Well, that could be understandable. I'm sure some of them have gone out to start celebrating. And
well, there will be a change of shift briefing shortly. And after that change of shift briefing, we understand that there will be a few parties.
A few parties was the term used. As, one can understand that the fact that it wasn't logged exactly when the control was handed over to Dryden, and I think part of the euphoria of what had happened there, the tremendous success.
They got to look at the clock.
They didn't look at the clock, which of course wasn't necessary to the success of the mission. But the mood was very up here.
Again, we'll be waiting for that change of shift briefing to see how the flight controllers and the other NASA officials here assess the flight. But I'm sure we'll hear much of what we've already heard and more super.
And I think what we're going to notice in the next few days is that this will represent the attention and the success as will focus public opinion, which has always been there. There's been a public feeling about space that hasn't been as articulate as I think it may now become.
But you make an interesting point, Hugh, because I think there was a public attitude of great concern over the Space Shuttle Columbia. Many things had gone wrong. It had taken a great deal of time, and there were still questions right up to launch. The launch was delayed.
And some questions even after orbit was established.
That's right.
Which was a matter of concern.
And with such a letter-perfect landing, I would think that there would be some change in the public's mind about how they feel about the Space Shuttle program.
And they've gotten acquainted now with the men on the ground and the men who flew it, and the machine. I think the hours of, if you followed television's coverage of this, you got a chance to see what an enormously complicated and impressive machine this shuttle is. It's not just a big airplane. It's
I think it was yesterday that Neil Hutchinson, the flight director, Silver Team, said that they would fly the next mission in September, Frank.
Yes, thank you. At least that's the plan, so we're told, Hugh and Max. Well, I suppose it does give a boost to morale. There's unquestionably a large public relations aspect to this whole operation that should not be ignored. I mean, NASA has, after all, been subject to severe criticism for delays, for setting target dates for launching, and then not meeting it, for various problems that cropped up with the test engines, all the brouhaha about the tiles falling off and so forth. And this gives them a very welcome lift. It also, I suppose, to some degree, restores some measure of confidence in American technology, which has been taking its lumps lately with the cars being recalled and so forth, and general things not going as well as they at least seemed to in years gone by. We not only got back Columbia and the two astronauts today, we also got back the solid rocket boosters that helped propel them up toward the edge of orbit. They came back to Florida, and Rebecca Chase, our correspondent, has a report on the return of the SRBs.
2 years, these reusable rockets.
I'm afraid it's not quite ready yet. We heard Becky Chase, but perhaps we'll have that report in a moment. Anyway, you recall what the two SRBs are. The two rockets, they stood there just like sentinels, you know, alongside the orbiter and the huge external tank, as it was called. The orbiter wedged right up next to the external tank, and the two SRBs. They were very important and also a little worrisome, at least to people who weren't as confident of their working performance as some of those who actually put them together, I guess, because with an SRB, once you light it, you can't control it. It just goes, and if it shuts down, it shuts down. Well, anyway, they've got them back now. That's an important part of this whole shuttle business, to be able to reuse some of these things again. And here is Becky Chase's report.
They were the first reusable rockets ever developed for spaceflight. At liftoff, the two solid rocket boosters provided the thrust for the orbiter to escape the pull of gravity. 24 miles up, 2 minutes after liftoff, the boosters separated from the orbiter, just as NASA planners had envisioned. Retrieval ships picked up the rockets 140 miles out to sea, right on target. Damage to the nozzle of one booster prevented the plug from being securely fastened, so the booster was towed in with its tail dragging in the water. Today, experts had their first chance to assess the damage.
The damage was much less than we expected, and we feel like, having not been able to pull them out of the water yet and look at them totally, it'd be premature to say that there was hardly any damage, but it looks very good on both of them.
A visual inspection showed there was no structural damage. The paint wasn't even scratched or burned. In fact, several Scotch tape stick-on markers were still attached. The boosters now will be cleaned and refurbished so they can be reused.
I fully expect that most of these parts will be back for the 6th flight, which is what they're scheduled to be on.
Each solid rocket booster cost $25 million to build. It will cost about $7 million to refurbish. The preliminary assessment is that within 2 years, these reusable rockets will be ready to fly again. Rebecca Chase, ABC News, Port Canaveral, Florida.
Rebecca, the astronauts are, we believe, getting ready to come out of the building that you see there, parked just behind these cars. They went in there some time ago, quite a while ago. Here's an aerial view of the complex of buildings at the Dryden Space Research Center. And we saw quite a few folks coming out before, so we assume that maybe something is about to take place, as we say. They've been in there a long time, but they're supposed to come out and eventually greet people who are waiting for them here before they make their move on to Houston.
Frank, this Gene.
Yes, Gene.
I expect what they've been doing in there is not just taking a physical, but of course removing all of their biomed sensors that they had on for monitoring their heart rate and respiration rate, getting out of their pressure suits and back into comfortable flying coveralls, which they'll probably wear back to Houston, probably taking a cold shower, maybe having a cold drink. I can't really believe that the physical is so extensive that it really is taking all that time.
And I suspect most of all, Gene, beyond the physical, reunion with the families.
Well, there's a certain amount of reunion with the family. There's we talked about it earlier. It's pretty tough to stay home and wait, and so it's pretty nice to have the rest of the family join you like John and Crippen have done with their families today.
Well, there's some sort of a convoy moving out there, gentlemen. Maybe they're in it. There's no reason why they have to be in a van now, especially equipped van. They can get into an ordinary car. Oh, yeah, I can see them coming now. I mean,
Frank, here's word from Shuttle Control here at Dryden saying the astronauts and their families are leaving for the VIP side.
Yeah.
6-car convoy.
Well, of course, there's no quarantine required. They didn't pick up any germs. And, of course, the last 3 flights to the moon, we didn't have any quarantine either. Once we were satisfied we weren't going to bring anything back. We don't have to worry too much about them catching a cold at this time because it'll be a while before they fly again. I'm sure that's what's going through John's mind as well as Bob Crippen's mind. When can I get back in and fly again? But
they're going to come right by us here, gentlemen. We're going to get a good look at them.
Great.
I wish you were over here, Gene and Jules. The cars are swinging right by the area set up here. We'll see them go right by in a moment. Right. Wish I knew which car they were in. I'd like to wave.
I can tell you this. We've heard, Frank, Young and his wife are in the 2nd car, and I believe the voice of Dryden Control said Crippen and his wife were in the 3rd car. And then the 4th car was, I think, said had other members of the Young family, presumably his children, who are somewhat fairly well grown now.
They're getting a good look, too, as they go by at Columbia, which is off to their right.
Sure they wanted to do that. There's, again, a lot of sentimental value attached with that big bird, and I look forward. I'll have my day with the 2 of them probably not too long in the future, and I'm looking forward to talking with them myself.
The big bird itself is, before very long, going to be towed over here to not far from the VIP site where the astronauts are going right now, where it will eventually be placed back on top the 747 that will take it back to Kennedy.
Well, in fact, some of that work that's going on now is in preparation to recycling it, loading aboard the 747 and taking it back for refurbishment work at the Kennedy Space Center.
The engineers I've talked to here estimate it'll be a week of preparatory work before they can put the big bird, the Columbia, on top of the 747 to fly it back to Cape Canaveral.
What's the rush? Why don't they take their time to just look it over very carefully out here?
Well, the majority of the test facilities and, of course, refurbishment facilities are at Kennedy's Space Center as planned, Frank, and this was just a transient point, particularly for these first several flights.
And remember this, too, Frank, that NASA is on test itself to see how long it takes to refurbish and prepare a shuttle for its 2nd flight. As you mentioned earlier, NASA once spoke of 56 flights in a 10-year span. The last numbers I heard were 46, but I was given official, unofficial, private skepticism that will never occur. You just can't launch one of these things every week or 2 weeks. You want about 1 flight every 3 or 4 weeks. So in a sense, Columbia assumes a new role now as the test vehicle to see how long it takes to get a bird ready for flight.
Where are some of the... Go ahead, Gene.
Well, I was just going to say, if we see John and Bob get out of those cars, I'm hoping they are. I don't know exactly where they're going.
Well, we're told that John Young and his wife are in the 2nd car and that Bob Crippen and his wife are in the 3rd.
Are they headed towards the VIP side?
Yeah, sure. They're
great. I just want to make the remark, they're back down here physically on Earth, but I think when they get up there in front of that microphone, you'll find that they're still got a ways to go before they both come back down to Earth in reality.
I think they've arrived there, haven't they? It's out of my line of sight, but I guess the cameras can pick it up.
The convoy of the convoy of 6 cars seems to be approaching the VIP site now, Frank.
I see. They're going to get a hand when they let's go to Lynn Sure. She's there at the VIP site. Lynn, you all waiting to greet them?
Absolutely, Frank. Everyone here now knows that they are on their way. I don't know how they know. It was not announced, but they do know. We're told that the little caravan is going to circle around and come in the driveway on the far end of this VIP section. This little platform, of course, has been set up slightly away from the VIP tent. No one's cheering yet. They're just quietly waiting. They've been lined up at the ropes for about the last 30 minutes, I think. Not sure when they were coming. Frank?
Thank you, Lynn. Well, we'll stay on and see them very shortly now, I guess. There are supposed to be, at least so I'm told, several speakers before the astronauts actually get a chance to speak, but I should imagine all those preliminary remarks will be relatively brief, because the people that we really want to hear from are John Young and Bob Crippen. Isaac Gillum, who is the director of NASA operations here at the Dryden Research Center, will formally greet them. The Secretary of the Air Force is here, Vernon Orr, Dr. Alan Lovelace, who is the acting administrator of NASA. Well, it's been quite a day, hasn't it? Oh, the sun is almost directly overhead here now. Not getting any cooler.
It's been an exciting day for us all.
I have a little more now on the remarks of the president, or the statement that the president has sent to the astronauts. Your brave adventure has opened a new era in space travel. You put new worlds within closer reach and more knowledge within our grasp. Let's open the microphones down there so we can hear the applause as the astronauts come into view. Oh, there's quite a crowd there, as you see. Lynn, do they have a speaker's platform set up? Oh, there they are.
Absolutely, Frank. There's Bob Crippen in his blue jumpsuit. John Young behind him, both of them with their wives, shaking hands and being greeted now. The crowd, rather subdued. They're kind of in awe of these two men, as a matter of fact, Frank. They're sort of shyly approaching the platform. I think Gene Cernan was right, however. Their grins are ear to ear to ear to ear. They are still flying up in Columbia, even though they're down here right now. Both of them with their wives. John Young holding his wife's hand. Greeting the various dignitaries who are also expected to make very brief remarks. You know, the two of them in those bright blue uniforms, so cheerful right here out in the middle of this desert, Frank.
Yes. Well, they have good reason to be pleased. I think a lot of us felt some apprehension early this morning. I know I did, driving out here, thinking about that steep descent, as Jerry Brown's,
right,
governor of California.
Yeah, the governor was not meant to make any remarks and was added to the list just a little while ago. He has now greeted them.
Well, he's become quite a space buff.
Oh, absolutely. He was there at the launch, as you know, cheering it on, willing it to go up. He was there, in fact, for the launch and for the scrubbed launch. He stuck around.
Out here a couple of years ago, too, for the test drops.
Here they come up on the platform now. They do have assigned seats. I don't know if they will stick to that or not. It really is amazing, Frank. There is a very subdued feeling here. There's not that wild cheering we heard in Florida. Well, maybe they're going to start now.
Yes. Now they come into plain view.
This should be Ike Gillum, the director of the Dryden Flight Research Center.
Hey, there's a shot.
Oh, happy day. I have a surprise for those of you who are here. I'm Ike Gillum, director of the Dryden Flight Research Center, and I have the honor of being at the ceremony. I come up here with one intent. To dazzle you with my brevity. At this point, I'd like to introduce General Robert T. Marsh, Commander of Air Force Systems, and personal representative of the Secretary of the Air Force, who will say a few words. General Marsh.
Thank you. John, Crippen, welcome back to this historic landing site here at Edwards Air Force Base. You know, it really is great to have the first piloted landing from space because it carries out the long
Anybody hearing this, fellow?
The historic first of Edwards. All the way back to 1942, we had the first high-powered landing here at Edwards. 1947, Chuck Yeager, as everybody knows, broke through the sound barrier. In the 60s, Neil Armstrong, Joe Walker set records for the X-15. And in 1967, Keith Knight was here, set records for the X-15. In the 1970s, we did the X-24B demonstrations and technology effort that led eventually to this kind of a landing. So you've really capped off the great tradition and history of Edwards Air Force Base. And let me just say that the men and women of the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army have really felt great pride and privilege to support your effort throughout the world. And in fact, many of them who have deployed all over the world in support of this current operation are very happy indeed that they didn't have to exercise their support in any more strident way. Congratulations. We're glad to have you back. Hail Columbia.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you our boss in NASA, the acting administrator of NASA, Dr. Alan Lovelace.
Thank you, Ike. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this epic flight of Columbia proves once again that the United States is number one. Number one. I think it's a proud day for America, for NASA, and for all of the thousands of people that made this mission possible. I think John and Cripp have opened a gateway to opportunity that I hope the United States shows the resolve and determination to seize that opportunity. President Reagan wished that he could be here today. He has sent his personal representative to be with us on this occasion, and I would like to introduce the Honorable Vern Orr, Secretary of the Air Force. I would also like to ask John and Cripp to join us here at the podium.
They want you together. They want you together.
Right, okay.
How about that? Astronauts Young and Crippen, distinguished guests, America is a nation of families. And this is a family separation. I'd like to ask the wives to come and join us. Please, we're honored. On behalf of the President of the United States, it's my honor to welcome you back safely. The President, Mrs. Reagan, and an entire world breathed a sigh of relief when you touched down a few thousand yards out there. I have heard pilots talk about hot landings or bringing them in smoking, but you set a new definition for those terms. 60 years ago, two pilots, Navy, it hurts me to mention, flew nonstop from the East Coast and landed in California and opened a new era in transcontinental travel. We may look back in 60 years to this date and recognize that you opened a new era in space travel. I would have to state that they considerably bettered your time, but you took a circuitous route. The President has asked me not only to offer congratulations to you, but to the entire NASA team and to the thousands in our industrial base who made this possible. We are back in space after several years and proud of it. We have proved that the United States can undertake a complex scientific mission and carry it through to success. For President Reagan, well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John? Our speech break. It's
Part of yourself. Come on. Come on. Part of yourself.
This is Susie. Best thing that ever happened to me. It was a really tremendous mission from start to finish. Crippen is one of the hardest workers I know, and he carried me through that whole thing. I think we've got a fantastic and remarkable capability here. We're really not too far, the human race isn't, from going to the stars. And Bob and I are mighty proud to have been a part of that evolution. Thank you.
John is our speech maker. This is my wife, Jenny. As the rookie of the group,
I can say that waiting 12 years to get my flight in space was well worth it. Now I'll go stand in line for another 12 years if that's what it'll take, but I don't think it will. I think we're back in the space business to stay, and I think myself and all of my compatriots are going to get many more opportunities to fly. And I think that, as has been said here, we are really in the space business to stay. Thank you.
I just might take this moment to express to John and to Cripp, and I hope I'm speaking for all the NASA employees, I believe I am, and the NASA contractors. It's been a special pleasure for us to have been associated with two super guys like you and Cripp, John. If at the moment we have the governor of the state of California, Governor Brown, who would like to make a special presentation. Governor Brown?
On behalf of all the people of California, I wish to express our pride at being the host for this landing of the first shuttle flight. And on behalf of the citizens of this state, I'd like to award the Order of California to each of the astronauts. First, Robert Crippen, will you stand up and see if I can put this around your neck?
Yes, sir. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, John? Okay. I want to give you the certificate from my NASA guy. Congratulations. I love what you said. We'll give you one little more to it.
Together up front.
Come on. Take the picture. I don't know, you get a picture there. Right. Yeah, we can do
that. As I said at the beginning, we were going to try to keep the ceremony as brief as possible. We didn't want to rush you. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending this momentous occasion. And if you have the opportunity, come by and visit us again at the Dryden Flight Research Center in Edwards Air Force Base Complex. Thank you.
Well, the astronauts have now received their first award, the Order of California, from the Governor of California, Jerry Brown. And the ceremony is breaking up there now. We've heard brief remarks from the astronauts, but eloquent, too, weren't they, in their way? What did John Young say? After saying it was a tremendous mission from start to finish, he added, "We are not too far now, the human race, from going to the stars." That's kind of an impressive thought. And Bob Crippen said that he had waited 12 years to get his flight in space, but it was well worth it. And he expressed confidence he won't have to wait that long to go back again. They're going away now.
Frank, those were very monumentous remarks by...
Yes, Gene, go ahead.
Those were significant remarks by John. I told you over the years of his experience, he certainly has mellowed quite a bit and thought very seriously about the work that he's involved in. And he's right. We truly have evolved into the heavens one step further than we had in Apollo. We now have an opportunity not just to enjoy what we've done, but really make practical use and application of what we've done with the aid of a vehicle like the Columbia and with the efforts of people like John and Bob.
That award, by the way, that was given to the astronauts was also given to the three people from California who were hostages in Iran, the Order of California. Yeah, that was quite a thing to say. Not too far, the human race, from going to the stars. He didn't put it in nationalistic terms either, did it? He talked about man, you know, mankind reaching for the stars.
Well, it is mankind that's reaching. We're a very small planet, a very beautiful star in the heavens, but we are very singular in nature. Although we create our own problems, when you stand back and look from 250,000 miles away, you don't see those boundaries. You don't see the language and color differences that we seem to make such a big thing of down here on Earth. And perhaps someday something like the shuttle will allow mankind to overlook those differences and coordinate his efforts together, as John said, in reaching for the stars.
The astronauts are going to go back to Houston. Now they're leaving in this convoy, and they will arrive in Houston later on today at Ellington Air Force Base, where there will be more ceremonies of welcome. And of course, they're going to stay in Houston for a time and be debriefed and answer all the questions that all the technical experts, the scientists and others have prepared for them.
The first chance they'll have to relax is when they get on that Gulfstream 2, the shuttle training plane, which they've flown so much of the time in preparation for this flight, and can take off their shoes, sit back for about 3.5 hours. Again, they'll be captive with their families. I think they'll just really let loose at that time and relax and talk about the mission a little bit unofficially, and for the first time have a chance to think about it.
You mentioned, Gene, the view from space and how it makes all the problems that we inflict upon one another here on this beautiful Earth seem so ridiculous. Gee, you'd like to believe that you don't have to put people in space capsules and send them out into outer space to make us realize that it is kind of one world and that we all have a common bond in protecting not only the environment but the humanity of the people who live on it. I want to go back now to shuttle control in Houston and Hugh Downs for some thoughts on this adventure. Hugh?
Yeah, Frank, I think what we've seen over these past 3 days here, first of all, it's the most remarkable series of tests of flying equipment ever made. We've seen compacted into one flight, one episode, test flights that would normally be accomplished over months, maybe a couple of years. We've seen an untried rocket craft with an unusual mix of rocket fuels, both liquid and solid, tested successfully. We've seen a massive spacecraft run mostly by computers in orbit for the first time successfully. And now we've seen a huge airplane, a massive glider, tested at staggering supersonic speeds. And we've seen that landed successfully through the atmosphere. A test pilot's dream, and I think a test pilot's potential nightmare. A flight of real accomplishment of remarkable dimension. And incidentally, Columbia, as an airplane, has broken all world records for speed in air flight. It was said a year ago that the shuttle represented the leading edge of technology, that its systems were advanced almost beyond proving. Well, they have been tested, and now they are fact, accepted technology. This episode in space, this astonishing flight of Columbia, should go a long way in washing away the growing self-doubt in this country about our ability to get things done. Max?
Hugh, I could add little to that. I think this has been a very meaningful trip. I notice as we watch the families, the astronauts and their families together, this is the first time that we've had such a rapid reunion of astronauts with families. And there's a kind of symbolism there, I think, for the country in what we achieved on this day that causes us to forget all those problems we do have and will continue to have. But I would think there's an elevation of the spirit here. Just as the shuttle flew, I think the spirit of the American people today is soaring. Or at least it's hopeful about the future. Frank?
Yeah, well, I was just waving to them. They're just going on by here. Thank you very much, Max. Well, they're on their way back. Good luck. Well done. They're heading on back to a complex over here where they'll get on board a plane and head for Houston. There's nothing to add to this. It's been a marvelous day. As John Young said, we've taken a step, and we're not too far from going to the stars. That's a kind of a worthwhile endeavor, isn't it? There's only enough time remaining for me to express my gratitude and my thanks to Jules Bergman, to Gene Cernan, the commander of Apollo 17, to Max Robinson, to Hugh Downs at Mission Control in Houston, to Lynn Scher, to Ken Kashiwahara out at Weed Patch, and to Colonel Guy Bluford, who was here with us at Edwards Air Force Base. Let's have another quick look at John Young and his wife, and Bob Crippen and his wife. This is Frank Reynolds from Edwards Air Force Base in California. So long for now.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have...
been the next giant step. ABC News live coverage of the first flight of Space Shuttle Columbia. Brought to you by Polaroid, inventors of Time Zero film and the new Time Zero One Step. Now in the made-for-each-other pack, the fast, convenient way to enjoy brilliant Polaroid film. By Listerine. Listerine Strong. It kills germs that cause bad breath and gives you clean breath for hours. And by the new Chrysler Corporation, who invite you to test drive their new 1981 cars and trucks. More happenings on the historic day on ABC's World News Tonight, and later full coverage on ABC News Nightline. This has been a special events presentation of ABC News.
The Space Shuttle Columbia has returned to Earth, landing today at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Join Frank Reynolds, Max Robinson, and the ABC News team for a complete wrap-up of the important events of this history-making spaceflight. Tonight on ABC's World News Tonight.